Welcome into the DNVR Avalanche Podcast. You got Rudo, you got AJ. We're joined by Chris Peters today to talk all things NHL draft and, of course, through an Avalanche lens. Chris, first of all, thank you for coming on and joining us. I think everyone knows the top of this draft class is something pretty special here, but how do you rank out the rest of the first round? How solid is this year?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be with you. I think I would say in terms of, depth of the first round, it's pretty similar to a lot of drafts where you don't see there's not a ton of separation between the back half of the first round or maybe like 25 on to, midway through the second. I think it's a good range to be in. There's a lot of good prospects. There is some value to be had late in the first round, early in the second round. So that's a good thing. I think that this was a year that most teams wanted to be in the first round. They wanted to have a way in there. And to have a first round pick is never a bad thing. So, I think there's certainly some possibilities with what's going to be available late in the first round. And then also, not that it's going to matter to the Avs since they don't have very many picks in the middle range of the draft. I think there's going to be some good value there as well. But yeah, it's been a fun year to track. Obviously, the top of the draft makes it a lot more fun when you've got guys like Connor Bedard and Adam Fantilli and stuff like that. But I think even as you move further down the board, you're going to see a lot more guys that have good careers.
I am curious if you were Pat Verbeek, you've got the second pick. Are you taking Fantilli or do you dream on Michkov?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion. I think any team that's picking after one has to have it, right? I think you have to discuss like, hey, Matvei Michkov is an unbelievable talent. Coming into the season, we were talking about him in the same vein as Connor Bedard, and what will we have done if he was in? Let's say he was in the CHL this year. He wouldn't have been, but let's say he was, and he's like, just what kind of numbers would he have put up in that league? I mean, he's just an exceptional offensive talent. But I think if you're the Ducks and you're kind of in a position now where, you've got a young core together, you still want to continue to build out the middle of your lineup. If you do draft an Adam Fantilli or even a Leo Carlsson, you are, giving yourself an opportunity to have a little bit more flexibility with where you put Trevor Zegras in your lineup. And if he is going to be a center full time as he has been, or if you move him to the wing or other things like that, you've got Mason McTavish as well. But, I think in terms of stylistic fits, it's going to be really hard for Pat Verbeek to pass up on Adam Fantilli, who has the size, the speed. Do I think Michkov has a higher ceiling? I do. I think the offensive game that he has is immense and enormous. But what I think with the risk factor and everything else, I think that Fantilli is the safer option, but I also think he fits with what they're doing and where they're going. And I think that's the value that you can get out of an Adam Fantilli pick probably allows you to pass on the risk of a Michkov, though it is an interesting discussion to have.
How far down the draft board does the risk reward, or I should say the reward, start to seriously outweigh the risk?
I mean, for me, it would start at 4. Like at the, I think that both Fantilli, Carlson, big players that have value down the middle, highly intelligent, skilled, that's tough to pass on. And so, but I think if you're, starting right there at 4, if you're the San Jose Sharks, if you are the Montreal Canadiens, if you are the Arizona Coyotes, if you are the Philadelphia Flyers, teams like that in that range, he's the best player available at that point. And I think he's the best player by a significant margin eventually there. And certainly in terms of ceiling, it's super high. So, I don't think he'll get out of the top 10, but I would not be shocked if he fell out of the top 5, because I think that the value of the guys that are available within the first 5, 6, 7 picks allow you to kind of say, okay, we're still going to get a great player, and now we don't have to worry about this. And I don't think the contract is as big of a problem for Michkov. I don't think that the geopolitical situation is absolutely a factor and will be taken into consideration. Also, I think that this is a decision that is going to reach the highest levels of every organization that's considering it. I think there's absolutely going to be some owners out there as like, do we really want to do this? Do we really want to take this on and take this risk? But to me, I think he's no worse than the third best player in this draft. And he might even be the second best player in the draft based on his offensive toolkit. But because he's not an amazing skater, because he's on the smaller side, you can at least say there's other ways to justify not taking him, I suppose. But yeah, but for me, it starts very early. And I think that, once you're outside of those first 3 picks, if you're San Jose, the balance that you have to kind of think about, he's such a special player that sometimes, yeah, the reward opportunity there is significant.
Could we see some other wingers jump ahead of Michkov because of that? Obviously, you have the centers, Fantilli, Carlson, Bedard, maybe even a Will Smith in there. But could we see someone like a Ryan Leonard jump ahead of him?
I think it's possible. I do. I think it's possible for a Leonard, for, maybe less likely for a Zach Benson. But I think that, yeah, there's a chance that a Ryan Leonard would move ahead, because he's a guy that I think NHL teams are very high on. He's also not tall, but he's thick, he's strong, he's got some power elements in his game, he's a good skater. He scored 50 goals this year, so he checks a lot of boxes for a lot of teams, and he has that physical element. So there's a good chance it could be him. Benson is a highly competitive individual. He's really good off the puck as well as on the puck, but he's a smaller player with below average skating. So, those are kind of the questions you got to decide on. But and why, for me, if I'm not the one that has to make these multi-million-dollar decisions, but I watch the players, and I think the gap between Michkov and guys like Smith, Leonard, and Benson is pretty significant. So that's where things are going to get interesting.
I do find it interesting we have to wait 3 years for him, where we just saw Logan Cooley decided to go back to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Arizona will end up waiting at least 2 years for Cooley to make his pro debut.
Correct.
And so you're looking at, and when you talk about guys like Will Smith and Ryan Leonard, Zach Benson, what are the chances the team ends up waiting 2 years on those cats anyway? And
Right.
it ends up being a pretty, the one extra year to get a significantly lower ceiling on a prospect than Michkov.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's certainly one that I've heard from NHL people as well, is that, hey, you know what? Honestly, we might be losing a year at most out of him, because that third year, he's not a guy that would have come into the NHL next season. He's not a guy that probably would have come into the NHL the season after that. He's got too much physical development left to go before he's ready for that. And so, basically you're getting 3 years of free development. Yes, there's the threat of him signing an extension. There's the threat of whatever's going on in the geopolitical landscape that that nobody has any control over here, at least in hockey terms. And that could blow things up a little bit for you. And all of a sudden that, then that's the tough pick, is that, wow, that's the risk you run. But if I don't think the contract situation is scaring teams, I also think that there's a large feeling that Michkov's desire is not to continue in the KHL, but to come to the NHL after his contract is up and after his obligations are fulfilled. Getting him out of the contract early is certainly something I think teams are exploring, but it does not sound an especially likely scenario. We did see it with Ivan Miroshnichenko, who just signed with Washington and was able to get out of his contract with Omsk. But SKA St. Petersburg is a totally different ball of wax. They are the most powerful European club. They are the richest European club. They don't let people out of their contracts. And not only that, but Michkov is a very important player for Russia in general. That's the other thing that I think people are considering, is like, he's kind of he's a national star in Russia, and he has a lot of value to the KHL and to the team and to, everything. So that's not a small thing either. But I still think that the best Russian players, and we're still seeing it, Russian players are signing contracts. They're coming over. When their KHL contract is done, they're on their way here. Nikita Chibrikov signed with Winnipeg, so it's like, that's not, guys, like when you see that, Buffalo has been able to sign their guys, then it's not as big of a concern, because I think that most of the best Russian players still want to play in the NHL. And that's a huge benefit to teams. And I think that's what they'll be talking about with Michkov.
And I know I wanted to start this with Michkov, but that Russian factor does feel exacerbated this year. There's a couple of other first-round prospects in Simashev and Guliev that are going to be intriguing, especially in a class that does not offer up a ton of strength at defensemen.
Yeah.
Do you where in the first round do you think that those two guys start to make sense? If in the first round at all?
Yeah, I think Semishev is certainly one of the guys that will get a strong consideration because of the size, the mobility, his defensive capabilities, but he's not a very offensive, not offensively gifted. So sometimes those guys don't go in the first round anyway. Gulyayev is mobile, dynamic, very skilled, and makes a lot of good plays. And I think that he's going to be, an interesting player to track. But I think that there's a good chance that we'll see those players go after 20, and that's probably, you're starting to say, okay, well, where can they go? Because the other thing that happens too is with the Russian players, where you draft them kind of tells them what you think about them, right? And that's the amount of investment you're willing to put into them. Like, I mean, we didn't see Kirill Kaprizov for years. We didn't see Shesterkin and those guys for years because they're mid-round picks. They weren't guaranteed anything. There's nothing, whereas a first-round pick is guaranteed an awful lot. But I do think that there are a lot of teams that are very on to those guys. Daniel Boots is another one that is going to get significant interest as a first-round draft pick, a 6'5" forward that can score. So that's another element. But yeah, so I think that, the back half of the first round is where we'll see those guys go. I know it's a pretty big range, but that's 3 players that you're looking to potentially go in the first round with a significant risk factor attached to them. So I would anticipate that those guys go a little bit later. They're not as easily projectable as a Michkov is. And not that Michkov is a sure thing by any means because of the size and skating, but I do think that they've got a lot of capabilities there.
When you're talking about getting a potential superstar, it's pretty easy to talk yourself into.
Exactly, yeah. And whereas we might get a top 4 guy, we might get a 5th defenseman. Like, yeah, it's like you don't start, doing those gymnastics.
I wanted to expand on that defense beyond just Russia there. 1, do you think Reinbacher sneaks into the top 10? And then 2, how many defensemen realistically could go in the first this year?
Yeah, I think it's pretty likely that Reinbacher goes in the top 10. I think there are enough teams there that have some needs at the defensive position. I mean, I'm interested to see what Arizona does with 6 and 12. Having that, maybe you reach for the defenseman and with the 6th pick, and then you still get a quality forward at 12. Or maybe you do it the exact opposite way and take whichever defenseman's left at 12. There's a lot of different things that can happen, but I think Reinbacher as a big right shot with mobility and good puck moving skills and good production at a pro level in Europe, he is going to be a pretty easily projectable. Not, again, when I say easily projectable, it's all relative. It's it's relative within draft terms, like what they're actually able to do. So. But I mean, I think that he's got a lot of the tools that you look for in a top 4 defenseman. I think he's one of the few defensemen in this class that has, an outside chance of being a top pairing defenseman. And those are, I think if you can get a guy that is going to play on your blue line 18 to 20 minutes a night, you're going to be happy with that pick in a high range. So I do think that will happen. In terms of the overall defenseman, I think that we'll probably see a lower number than usual. I think it'll be a combination of Axel Sandin Pellikka, Tim Wielander. There's the potential maybe Theo Lindstein sneaks in there. I think Simashev and Gulyayev have a chance to go in there. Oliver Bonk with a really good chance. Maybe Lucas Dragicevic sneaks in there too. But there are a lot of defensemen that I would say have a lot of questions coming into this draft. Like, you've got Dragicevic, who had, over 70 points this season from the blue line, but is not the best defensively and doesn't have the best detail in his game. And it's like, is he too one-dimensional? But, then there are other guys like Tanner Molendijk who don't necessarily have the size, but have this mobility and, that might speak to a team. And he's got, he didn't necessarily put up the big enough numbers this year to kind of overlook the size. But yeah, I think, 5 or fewer is a realistic possibility here in the first round. And I'll be very interested to see how it all shakes out. And I think that where Michkov goes is also another thing that is pretty, that's going to dictate a lot of the order of things and where things end up. So I'm fascinated to see how this first round goes.
Do want to get into the Avs pick a little bit here, but first we are brought to you by Shady Rays. You can go get your sunglasses at shadyrays.com. Use code DNVR right now, and you get 35% off any pair of sunglasses for Memorial Day weekend. So go check that out. Get your Shady Rays today, either shadyrays.com, or if you're local here in Colorado, they have a brick and mortar in the Park Meadows Mall. And then wherever you are, you can go get yourself Fubo TV to watch television. It's just like having cable. Go to FuboTV.com/DNVR today, and you'll get all of your channels. Over 140 channels there. They got sports, they got television, they got movies, they got it all for you. With the DNVR link, you get 15% off your first month of Fubo TV Pro. So go check them out today. Get it right on your TV. You open up the app, you're watching television. Check them out, Fubo TV. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. I know AJ's been chomping at the bit for this one. You mentioned it. The Avs don't have any mid-round picks. Can they talk themselves into a goalie at the end of the first round?
I mean, yeah, because of the fact that they don't have all those picks, I guess it's possible. I think that there are some really good goaltenders in this draft, guys that will go, probably in the second round. You look at the various goalies that are out there, none of them are perfect. And you're never going to find that. I think the other thing is too, it's so hard to find a starting goalie in the first round. Like, it happens. Obviously, you get guys like Andrei Vasilevsky, Jake Ottinger. I mean, it absolutely happens. But, then suddenly Aiden Hill takes you to the championship, the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference final, and on the cusp of a Stanley Cup, or a Stanley Cup final. That's the way it goes. You find a Darcy Kemper, you're in free agency, you find guys that can fill the position. And I think because of the variety of ways that you can find a starting goaltender, it's become less likely that you pick them. But let's just say, for instance, let's just, play along here and say, okay, well, are there any goalies that you could realistically pick in the first round this year, especially given the fact that you don't have any picks till way later in the draft? I would say that, if I'm going to use that pick, I'm probably going to take a bit of a swing. I'm probably going to take a bit of a swing on a guy that I think has a lot of upside, a lot of, there are tools there. And to me, that guy is Michael Hrabal. He is the goaltender for the Omaha Lancers this year. They weren't a good team. His numbers don't look amazing, but I watched him quite a bit this year, and he has a lot of the technical tools that you want. He has the size at 6'6". He has the athleticism. And he's competitive. And, I saw some of his best games this season, and his best games are exceptional. And then you put that in the size package that he has, and you say, okay, well, he's due to go to Omaha for one more season and then to UMass. We'll see if that's the plan and if it stays that way. But Hrabal is, a legitimate top tier goalie in this class. I still think there will probably be goalies later in the draft too. But if you want to get one of the top guys, I think that run is going to start in the second round. The Avs could potentially kick it off at 28th overall. But that's the guy with the upside to me. I think Carson Bjarnason is good, not amazing. He didn't have a great World Under 18s. I think that he's been okay at various points this season. Trey Augustine it was really good this year for Team USA. Adam Guyan, who played for the Chippewa Steel in the North American League and was Slovakia's incredible goalie at the World Juniors. Those are the types of guys that are going to be in this discussion to potentially go in the second round. Jacob Fowler as well just won a Clark Cup with the Youngstown Phantoms. Those are the top tier goalies that everybody's going to be kind of looking at. It's not an amazing year for European goaltenders, even though Hrabal and Guyan both are, but they played in North America. So I'm just mean goalies that are playing in Europe. But yeah, so it's an exciting class. And I think, to me, the only guy that I would even consider taking at that range would be Hrabal.
Celebrating over there, AJ.
I mean, I would be okay with that.
That's a pretty tepid response.
I mean, that's the guy that was the dart that I threw in my prediction piece in January. So I'm just trying to get as many of those right as I can, because it looks like some of those are real bad.
Up to 3 of them correct at this point.
Yeah, I think it's actually like 5, but
Well, it's not that bad.
yeah, we got to see who the Ducks hire as the head coach and who the Avs draft, and then that's the last of my chances.
7 out of
anyway.
20? That wouldn't be terrible.
That's what I'm saying. But no, I do wonder just what their approach is and how having that one pick, it's just on an island, like, you know, is it more valuable to them in trade, or is it more valuable to them to take a guy and try and develop? And if you are going to take a guy, I mean, we were just talking about the defense. Positionally, it's a lot easier for them to find forward. I mean, they've been going crazy in the forward market with college free agents the last couple of years, you know, with winning the Ben Myers sweepstakes and signing Jason Polin and Andre Pavel.
Yeah, they were aggressive. They've been aggressive on that front, but that's what you have to do, right? That's what you have to do. And when you just don't have picks, and I mean, I liked what they've done in the last couple of years on the free agency front.
And that's where they are making up ground on picks that they did not have the last couple of years. Right. And I think that's an interesting way to build a prospect pipeline. Because you know, you're not going to get very many NHLers out of undrafted college free agents. But
right.
If you can fill out, I mean, everybody's favorite example in Colorado is Logan O'Connor.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's if they can just continue to find some guys that can give them depth roles for free like that, it's fine. Like, they're doing just fine.
Exactly.
But when it comes to goaltenders, you know, they've drafted one goalie in the first round in their entire history, and it was Mark Denis. It went well. He was a long-time starter. He played 300
somebody
some odd
else.
games.
It went well. Yeah.
It's not the point, but it went well. They got it right. They got an NHL guy out of him, and right in this range of the draft too. So you know,
I mean, and that seems to be that has been kind of one of the bugaboos of the Avalanche's history, right? They don't draft and develop their own goaltenders, and that goes back years. And I think I was a believer in a Noonan. You know, I liked him as a player and a prospect and everything like that. Like, I was like, hey, he's maybe got one of the best chances of the guys they've taken over the years. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other players in there that, you know, just haven't panned out. So yeah, so I mean, like, that's the thing, is like, you know, can you get a goalie of the future at 28? Potentially, but I mean, the risk is just so darn high with those guys. I mean, I can't tell you definitively that Michael Hrabal is going to be an NHL player, but I mean, I think that he has the package and the you know, the upside to certainly get there. It's going to be up to them to get it out of him, and up to him to get it out of himself as well.
And I would also in this conversation say, again, this is largely driven by the fact that they have one pick. And so if you are going to keep that pick and you're really trying to take a big swing on it and not just play it really safe and just try to get a depth forward out of it, you know, a guy that's going to be maybe on your second or third line in the NHL, is it not more valuable, if you're just trying to take a home run swing here, to go ahead and try and get a starting goaltender versus, again, we've talked about these defenders in this class. It's not a very good class in the first round in this range of the draft. We're talking about second, third pairing guys here, if we're dreaming on them a little, and depth forwards.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I think, yes, there's some, I mean, I think every team is going to say, we just want to make sure we get an NHL player out of our first round pick. You know, we want to make sure, especially those late picks, we want to get a guy that's going to play for us. And that's the reason why we don't see as many goalies, because they have a huge miss rate on top of, you know, that's the question. But yes, in theory, if you have confidence in your goaltending development pipeline, if you have confidence in the path that the player is taking, and you have enough confidence in the ability that they've shown so far, if you feel like you can get a number one goaltender, absolutely, that makes sense. If you're convinced that you have the tools to put it, and I'm not saying that you have to say this guy's absolutely going to be an NHL goalie, because I think nobody can say that definitively, so they wouldn't. Mm-hmm. So, but yes, I think in theory, the more valuable thing, you know, hey, maybe get a third line center, or third line wing, or maybe a number 5 or 6 defenseman, or something like that. Yeah, starting goalie is infinitely more valuable. It's been proven over time that it's really hard to pick those kind of players out at the right time, and then do all the stuff necessary to get them to the next level.
So, from a value standpoint, what would you consider a success with a late first? The Avs pick at 27. Is any NHLer at all from that pick a success, or is there a certain level that they really should be hitting?
I mean, I think ideally everyday NHLer, with you're looking at that point at scoring depth, at a guy that can play on special teams, a guy that is going to have a defined role within the team. You're hoping that it's not a player that's kind of that AHL, NHL tweener. You're hoping that you have a player that is, that is always in your lineup. And, as we find, the further you get away from first overall, the precipitous drop is dramatic, and so the odds of you finding an everyday NHLer at 28 or in the back half of the draft is pretty low. I mean, there are plenty of late first round picks that you never hear from again. It's happening less frequently, though. I think most teams, though, would say, yes, if we have an everyday NHLer out of this pick, we will feel that we were successful. The other thing that you also evaluate is who else went. Who went after those guys? Who was still on the board? Who did we pass over? And why did we pass over them? So, there's very, very, very many ways to evaluate how you did at the draft. But I think that, if you get an NHL player out of a late first, you're feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I just, when I think about recent drafts and guys that I really liked at the end of first rounds, guys like John Beecher and Ryan Suzuki, and I'm looking at where those guys are right now, and I'm just like, would I rather have that guy in Colorado's system or take a chance on a starting goaltender?
Yeah.
I guess for me, I've just talked myself into it where I'm like, logically, I'm approaching this and saying, okay, I've got this pick that I don't think is it has a low chance to turn out at all. And if it does turn out a guy, it's more than likely going to be a depth guy.
Right.
Those are usually pretty easy and cost efficient to find around the league if you really need to, like if you're really desperate for it, you could find those guys. The starting goalie and especially because whatever the Avs are scouting at the goaltending position the last few years sure seems to be working, at least on the pro side. Now on the amateur side, I know it's a little different when you're talking about draft and develop, but the organization got something out of Jonas Johansson. They pluck Alexander Georgiev out of New York and get a great starting season out of him. They go into Europe and get Pavel Francouz several years ago who came over. It just seems like whatever the Avs are doing at the goaltending position and whatever traits they're identifying in guys seems to be pretty consistent, because it's not like they're all big guys or they're all really athletic guys. It's guys of all different sizes with different styles, different techniques. So to me, I'm just looking and saying, I feel like that's an area I have confidence in what the organization is valuing. And I'm trying to talk them into valuing a goalie at 27, I guess. If they look at him and say, we like this guy, if he's like 34 on their list, dude, just do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to is, what does their list look like? What is that going to be? And who's, because I think at the end of the day, especially at 28, you're just going to say, who's the next guy on our list? And you structure your list in a way to say, okay, are there some positional needs that we can address here? Is this a guy we can value a little bit more? That happens too. But yeah, I mean, I think for them, it's just going to be a matter of, going off the board and that they've created. And, if you feel like it's close, maybe you do make that decision and say, let's go for the goalie and let's take a shot here. But there's also the possibility that a goalie goes earlier than any of us expect. It's not out of the realm of possibility. So, sometimes that decision can get made for you before you even have a chance to pick.
After the Chinikov thing a couple years ago,
that one was crazy.
As soon as we get to pick 20, I am fully braced for anything to happen.
Yeah, I know. Anything can and will happen.
With Yarmo up there, you never know.
Yeah.
But on our draft board, AJ, who's your number one Breck Brew?
Strawberry Sky.
There you go. Strawberry Sky. I know vanilla porter's got to be in your top 3 also.
It is.
I'm the simple man. I get my meat and potatoes Avalanche Amber myself. But you can go get yourself some Breckenridge Brewery at your local liquor store. They're in all 50 United States. Use the Breck Brew beer locator at breckbrew.com to find it near you, or come down to the bar where we have 8 different kinds on tap. And make sure you're looking good when you roll in with Shady Rays. Wrong read. Illegal Pete's. Make sure you're full when you get down to the bar. Get yourself a delicious burrito.
Nice.
Happy hour from 3 to 6 p.m. There's one just a couple blocks from the bar if you want to hit that one up. 10 locations in total in Colorado to get all of the stuff you need for lunch or dinner. I don't know. This is such an easy one for me because I love burritos. Like, you cannot go wrong with a burrito, and Illegal Pete's are delicious. So just go eat a burrito and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Check out Illegal Pete's today. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche Podcast, here with Chris Peters. Going to put you on the spot a little bit. Who are the Avs taking?
A little bit.
Just a little.
I know there's 45 guys you could pick from right here, but
yeah, I mean, there really are a lot of players. I think in terms of the way things have shifted here in the last few months, and how boards move up and down. It's kind of tough to say. I think there are going to be some really good players in the range. Some guys that I think they're, will be intriguing to them. Like just kind of going off of, the board that I've been working on and will be coming out in the very near future. Just some names that are kind of in the range there, that there's a chance you could see a Quentin Musty there. He's not necessarily the fastest guy, but he's got size. He's had a really good year in Sudbury. There's a chance that he's around. David Edstrom is a guy that really came up and burst onto the scene at the World Under 18s, and now teams are much more interested in him. He's got size. He can skate pretty well. He made a lot of plays, just showed a lot of upside that, potentially could be there. But you know what, just since we're on here and we've been talking about it, and AJ's, trying to talk everybody into it, I'm not going to talk them out of it. And we'll just give you Hrabal. We'll just give you Hrabal and say, hey, forget about it. Because I mean, the thing is too, is like, as I'm, you start talking about certain guys like Edstrom, I'm really excited about, that if that's a guy that's there at 28, I'd rather have that than, I think there's a stronger likelihood that he's going to be an impact guy down the road. Or if Daniel Boot is still there, the size that he brings to the table and his scoring ability, that's a really attractive commodity as well. But, Hrabal has so many tools and upside, and yes, it's a humongous risk to take, but it's not completely outlandish to do it at that range.
I mean, in 27th pick, is it really a humongous risk? Is anything really a humongous risk at 27?
Not really. I still think picking a goalie in the first round is, because you don't want to miss on a first round pick. You don't want to have a guy that you could just completely miss on. And the miss rates for goalies is just higher than it is for any other position.
Is the highest risk for the Avs maybe just keeping the pick at all?
Yes.
I mean, it could be. Yeah, it could be. I think that there are opportunities, and especially on draft day, the value of those picks go up when there's a player that the team desperately wants to get, and they're still there. And, there's a real opportunity there for Colorado to trade back into the second round and still get good value. I mean, all the models would tell you, unless if you're a team, unless you are desperate for a player, you're pretty confident, you should trade down. You should trade down and get more picks, get 2 prospects, especially for the team that's kind of in the hunt right now. And then you look, as you look at the draft board and you look at various teams with many second round picks, like maybe Chicago wants to get up back another pick in the first round. They already have 2. Maybe Detroit wants to get in there. They've got many second round picks, so those are the teams. I think Chicago has like 4, Detroit has like 3 or 4, it's crazy the amount that they have. And so, getting more draft capital is another way to maximize your value. And on that note, you can still probably get one of those goaltenders. You know, you still probably would
Yeah.
get one of the top guys. If it's not Hrabal, it could be Guyon, it could be Bjarnason, it could be Trey Augustine, Jacob Fowler, even later. You know, like you never know. So there's a lot of good opportunity there, and there are going to be options at this draft. I think there are teams that have to clear cap space. There are teams that have to make other decisions. You know, there are going to be the way the board shakes out can really change the dynamic of a first round and of the trade market. So anything is possible at this point, and I think everything should be on the table for the Avalanche right now.
Are there, I know we're winding down here in a minute, but are there some guys in this range that you like maybe more than other people do that we should put eyes on and start giving extra consideration to?
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy that I like is a late first that I think a lot of people have more as a second rounder. Is Gavin Brindley from the University of Michigan. He's a bit on the smaller side, but he's an absolute spark plug player, high motor. You know, he can score. He gets in on the heart. He gets in hard on the forecheck. You know, he played alongside Adam Fantilli this year. He got kind of moved around a little bit, and whatever line he was on was one of Michigan's best lines. I mean, even at times, like when he was away from Fantilli, I think he was playing with TJ Hughes and maybe Rucker McGroarty at one point. And those guys were dominating shifts, and a lot of it had to do with Brindley's speed. And if you watch the World Juniors this year, Brindley had this just incredible motor that made him so effective on the PK, down the lineup. So, you know, he's a guy that the risk factor is there because of the size, but I think because of the speed, the tenacity, and then the offensive capabilities that he does have, he's a player that I would start thinking about a little bit more in that range. And especially a team like Colorado that plays fast, that has guys that can play with pace, and you want pace throughout your entire lineup like they have, you know. So I think that having a Brindley, he's probably down your lineup, but he's making an impact in a secondary way for you.
Brindley always reminded me a little of Jameson Reese from a few years ago.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That motor, that try hard. And I know that the Avs were pretty big fans of him. So
yeah, I liked Reese a lot too.
That's an interesting it's an interesting name to start us off with, because that's a guy that I've always been very lukewarm on him, because I want to know. I didn't get to see very much of him away from Fantilli, so that's my.
Yeah, and he didn't. His numbers weren't amazing away from
Yeah.
Fantilli. Like that's the other thing is like he wasn't scoring goals at that point, but. You know, I think that he just impacted the game in so many ways. That's really been the thing for me, is that while the numbers weren't spectacular, they were pretty good.
We are a little over a month from the draft. The NHL Combine starts the first weekend of June. Obviously, there's risers and fallers, but how much does a draft list change from today to draft day?
I think most of it will be very incremental at this point. What will change it is when they go through their interview process at the Combine, if there are medical issues that crop up at the Combine, and it's not always like, you know, we've hear about guys that have, you know, had their heart checked and there's a heart defect or something and they can't, you know, it happened with Martin Kaut at his Combine. Yep. You know, there's something going on physically with a player. But sometimes it also comes down to physical makeup and like, you know, just the body, even like body fat, different things like that they're looking at. And like, you know, musculoskeletal, whatever you want to say. You know, because like that can make that can impact decisions. They have, you know, their strength coaches, and then they also have like their sport performance people looking at players. But I think the interview process can move guys up and down a team's list. It can get guys off of a team's list. It can make a lot of different things. So the interview process is important. So you will hear a little bit more about movement after the Combine, but again, it's not going to be significant. These scouting meetings have mostly happened. There will be more at the Combine. There will be more right before the draft. Teams will continue to tweak as they need to. The Memorial Cup still has to be played. So there's a lot of different things that still have to happen before a team finalizes its list. But I think that most teams have a very good feel about what their board is going to look like, and it won't change dramatically.
All right.
Yeah,
sounds good. Chris, thank you again for coming on. If you want to tell the people where they can find all your stuff, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, guys. And all of my draft coverage is on flowhockey.tv. And we also have our YouTube channel set up with my podcast, Talking Hockey Sense, lot of clips there. We'll also have some video scouting reports coming out very soon on a number of prospects. And then, of course, my draft rankings will be dropping on June 1st, final rankings there. So that's where everything is. And also on Twitter at Chris M. Peters. I'll be in Nashville for the draft and really excited to go and get this thing going. So it's a great time of year and it's a lot of fun for me.
Say hi to Jesse and Megan for us out there at the draft. Thank you again. Go check out, follow Chris. You can follow us, DNVR Avalanche. Like and subscribe here on YouTube. We appreciate all of you, and we will be back. Well, I guess I won't be back, but the pod will be back on Tuesday. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.